See, we're on number 18 tonight. We're going to read most of chapters 37 and 38 in just a second, but I want us to start back in Genesis 15 just for a second. One of the amazing things about Scripture, and this is also just because of God being the primary author, is that there's times that God gives what may be even a gentle hint, and we're going back to the bruising of the heel and the bruising of the head. You know, if we've had a stone bruise or something, you know, that's painful, but a stone bruise in the foot is nothing to having a bruise that's in the head, and that was the contrast. I'm confident they had no idea then what that was going to come to mean in the fullness of time. And in the same way, this is God speaking to Abraham, and I want us to notice the transition. God will speak to the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he never speaks to Joseph in the same way that he spoke to the patriarchs. Yes, he'll be able to interpret visions, but God will specifically speak to them. And even at the very end, Joseph's been in Egypt a number of years, and God will speak to to Jacob, but he doesn't speak to Joseph. And Harold Shank has written a wonderful book on just the flow of the transition of things that happen with God. And this is something that we'll just be moving into. And in some ways, not totally, but in some ways, Joseph's experience with God is more like ours. He's there, he's present, there's no doubt about that. He gives very specific commands. But we're not going to get both the visions and the dreams and the speaking to us directly in the same way that he did to the other ones. I just kind of hold my head when I say this. There are people today who either feel like the Spirit speaks with them or God talks to them and other things. And I always get a little concerned. My brother-in-law went to a funeral where maybe 10 times God told me this and God told me that. And he never called the deceased by the right name one time through the whole funeral. It's kind of hard to believe that God's speaking to him when he never calls the poor deceased man by the right name through the whole funeral, and yet God, that was the whole thing. God told me this and God told me that. And my brother-in-law wanted to tell him, I wish God would have told you his right name. And it's just, you will just encounter a whole variety of things, but all I'm saying is that we're moving more toward the reality of how God works with us by the time the end of Genesis than we do at the very beginning. But here's something that God's going to say very specifically to Abraham, and I'm in chapter 15, verse 12. The sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram, and the Lord said to him, and listen very specifically, know of a surety that your descendants, and that's plural, will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs. They will be slaves there, and they will be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation which they serve, and afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. And then he speaks about, you'll go to your fathers in peace, you'll be buried at an old age, and they shall come back here in the fourth generation. Isn't that absolutely amazing? That while the first of the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the first of those patriarchs, is still alive, then God speaks to him and says, now this is what's going to happen. They're going to be gone for 4 generations, and then 400 years later, I'm going to bring them back to this land. Now, what to me is so significant about that is that only God could not only just say that and then do that.
That's right.
And this whole thing about, and again, one of the things that Thomas Warren, I got to have a wonderful class on the inspiration of the Bible, and he said, every book of the Bible is perfect for the reason that God gave it. And you just stop and think, God is that primary, He's the primary personality, the primary author, and yes, He will speak at different times in different ways, but those things are written for our learning. But we're tonight, not the nation, but we're going to send the 11th son into Egypt. And I just want you to think about this as we read this. How does Joseph get into Egypt? And it's not through goodwill. It's not through, oh, we're going to fulfill the purposes of God. It's through this continued intergenerational jealousy and anger and all these things that have been developing all this time. And we're just going to look at a summary tonight. It all starts with she's my sister. 4 generations earlier. And this is a repeat, but just keep this in mind. We pass down to the next generation more than the color of their eyes and their hair. And what we're going to see is that here's going to become the 4th generation of she's my sister and she's my sister, and these things get intensified. And there's a side of these people that they're walking by faith, they're godly people, and then there's another side that, can I just say, it's very human. And God is then going to work sometimes through and maybe even in spite of that human side that's going to be very, very real. So, CI, here's our central idea. The last episodes of Genesis begin with Joseph being sold by his brothers into slavery. And the promises, I want you to get up and walk the length and the breadth of this land, and someday I will give this to you. Well, Joseph is going to be the beginning of also this 400-year fulfillment that your people are going to be out of this land, and in the 4th generation I will bring them back. We'll just touch on some of these later, but I think of this in terms of who are the first readers of Genesis? People who've been slaves for 400 years in Egypt. And so when they come back to find out who the Moabites are, let's go all the way back to Lot. His wife becomes a pillar of salt. They're in the cave with his daughters. Let's get our father drunk. Okay, that's who these people are. And so if you've been gone for 400 years, you don't know who your neighbors are. Can I say it that way? And especially if you've been slaves for 400 years, you don't know who the Moabites are and who the Edomites are and who all these other people are. Oh, this is the descendants of Esau. And can I say we're distant relatives, that type of thing. And so the people who read Genesis for the first time are going to kind of look around and say, okay, so we're, can I say distant cousins? You know what I'm trying to say? We're distant cousins of these people, and here's the family tree that leads back to them. And yet God is also then going to be saying, and I call it the thread, and I won't do it again tonight, but it's going to start with that promise with Abraham in Genesis 12, and there is going to be a thread that's going to run straight to and through the cross, that God's going to continue to do that. So we want to identify how Moses sets the stage for the final events in Genesis. So we're going to read 37 and 38. We'll do 2 chapters and then just kind of talk about some details, but have highlighted some things for us to notice along the way. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojourning in the land of Canaan, and there are 10 of these in the book of Genesis. These are the generations of. And so 10 times Moses is going to break down the family trees, the generations. This is what's going to take place. And so from here to the very end, he's going to be saying these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph is 17, and we're going to do some chronology in his life, Lord willing, as we go through in a second. They were pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zillah, his father's wives. and I would say handmaids. Okay? These are going to be the handmaids of Rachel and Leah, so it's going to be their sons. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. And here again, and there's several of these, the jealousy, the favoritism that started between Isaac and Ishmael, that then is going to develop where then Isaac prefers Esau and Rebekah prefers Jacob. And again, with each one of these, you watch each generation, it intensifies and it gets stronger, and there's more serious consequences to the favoritism and to the jealousy that's there. Jacob loved Joseph more than the others because he was the son of his old age. And it's probably a robe with long sleeves. Many colors is the oldest translation. If you grew up in Bible class like I did, that was what we saw and heard in Bible class. It's probably a special coat with either long sleeves or something else, but it's a distinctive garment. And specifics about it matter less than the hatred, and that's the right word, the hatred that this produced in the other brothers, because this one brother received special treatment and everybody knew he loves him more. Okay. Wouldn't do this to their grandkids. Mother loved you or me best. Someone help me. TV show. Smothers Brothers. and these two guys at different times would take this play off. Would he say mother loved me best or you best? Anyway, it was one of those things that just through this stand-up comedy, these two brothers, a lot of the plot was moved along by the favoritism that's there. But in this case, when you've got 11 of the older brothers, and as we noticed, Benjamin's probably 8 years younger than Joseph, then this type of a rivalry intensifies. And the brothers saw that their father, in verse 4, loved Joseph more than all his brothers. That's even hard to read. Can you imagine being one of the 10 and realizing Dad loves one of us more than 10 of us put together? And you can just see where the favoritism, and you go all the way back through. It happened in the previous generation. It happened in the generation before that. And they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Verse 5, Joseph had a dream. He told it to his brothers and they hated him more. And sheaves in the field, my sheaves stood upright, your sheaves gathered around and bowed to it. Verse 8, are you indeed to reign over us? Are you going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. He has another dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars. There's 12 brothers. So all the brothers are going to bow down to me. And he told it to his father and his brothers. His father did rebuke him. What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed bow yourselves to the ground before you? And if you know the story, fast forward, what's going to happen in 2 decades? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept this in his mind. 37:12. The brothers went to pasture the father's flocks near Shechem, an important city in earlier transitions. Israel said, send you to your brothers. And Joseph said, here I am. See if it's well to them. Bring me word. And he came there. He found a man wandering. I'm looking for my brothers, verse 16. And they've gone away. Let's go to Dothan, I heard him say. 37:18. They saw him from afar, and before he came, they conspired against him to kill him. Well, remember Esau was conspiring to kill Jacob, and all the trickery that was involved to try to save his life. And it's one thing if one brother is planning to kill another one. It's another thing if a whole set of brothers are now involved in the conspiracy, I would call it, to try to kill him. Here comes the dreamer. Let's kill him, throw him into one of the pits, and then we'll say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. Most of us have been upset with one of our siblings. I doubt that most of us literally would want to kill them. We've sometimes used that idiom, I'm so angry, I could kill you or something, but this is not just an idiom, this is just the reality. And they're planning purposefully. So Reuben is the oldest. Shed no blood, let's throw him into the pit. Do not lay a hand on him. And he was hoping to rescue him and restore him to his fathers. Joseph came, they stripped him of the robe, and they threw him in the pit, and there was empty, and there was no water in it. Apparently Reuben is away for a bit. They sit down to eat, a caravan of Ishmaelites. And who are Ishmaelites? Going all the way back to previous generations, that other side of the family that didn't get the family blessings in the same way. With their camels, they have gum, balm, myrrh. They're carrying it to Egypt. Judah, and this is going to be very significant. Judah said to his brothers, what profit if we kill our brother, conceal his blood? Oh, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And isn't that compassionate? Why should we kill him when we can make a profit off of him? And plus this will just get him completely out of our hair, completely out of the way, and let's just sell our brother as a slave. And I just literally kind of hold my head and I think, what type of family rivalry has come to the point that we're going to sell a brother into slavery rather than killing him? And you can just see the intensity of the anger that has built up with that. They drew Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit. They sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Reuben returned, is upset, and they agree to take the robe, kill a goat, dip the blood in it. They bring it to the father, and it's an outright lie. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph's been torn in pieces. Jacob tore his garments, put sackcloth on his loins, mourned for his sons, mourned many days. And we notice this, in the earlier account, we have 12 brothers and one sister, Dinah, right? But what we find is that as time has gone by, there's at least some more sisters that we don't have their names. So Moses tells us all his sons and all his daughters, plural. So there are other daughters that are born into the rivalry that we don't know their names. We know the 12 sons, and we know the one daughter, which is going to come up in the next chapter. But we just find out, just through this one little reference, oh, by the way, then there's actually more girls that are born into the family, I assume, as time has gone by, but we don't have their names, don't know anything about them. He refused to be comforted. I will go to Sheol to my son mourning. His father wept for him. The Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Now what's very interesting, of course, this is inspired by God, but Moses is just going to kind of stop and kind of fast forward and move over. And this is a possibility. This is my think so. Judah is going to become the bloodline that's going to lead to Jesus. And because of, and his actions aren't very noble within themselves, but the three older brothers have disqualified themselves. Reuben has slept with the father's concubine. The other two brothers conspired to have the city circumcise themselves, and they killed the men. And so Judah, with his shortcomings, is going to be the fourth one. And because of what's going to happen eventually, I think God has Moses just kind of stop and just give us a section on these are the things that happened with Judah. So this is chapter 38. Judah went down, that's away from his brothers, and he saw a daughter of a certain Canaanite, and he took her and went into her, and we're going to have three boys, Onan, I don't know. May I ask my phonics teacher, how would you pronounce Shelah? Sheila, okay. I didn't, when you've used that word a few times in your life, you just come across it in the Bible. You don't know, is that exactly the same one or not? Shelah or whatever, but we'll call him Sheila. And these were born to him. And here's something very important. What was the reason for sending the servant from Abraham back to the homeland? Let's get a girl from our own people and not have one of the Canaanites. And why do we send Jacob back to the family of Laban? Let's get a girl from our own family. So the irony of ironies is that here's going to become the bloodline of Jesus, and we're going to go marry a Canaanite. And we're going to have 3 boys through her. Okay, this is just gross, so let's just read it quickly and go on, okay? Ere the firstborn was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so the Lord put him to death. He says to the second brother, go into your brother's wife and perform to her and have offspring. And I'll just say he had relations with her, but then he would not allow her to become pregnant. He withdrew in the act. And so he would have sex with her, but he made sure that she didn't have children. And God kills him. Okay, I'm filling in for my brother in a Bible class at Oklahoma Christian and just recounting this, and this kid raises his hand and he says, you're making that up. Surely that's not in the Bible. And I said, I understand. I said, I didn't want to embarrass you, but would you please turn to Genesis 38 and just read for us? And he comes to this point and he says, gross. I said, yes. And then I said kindly, you don't know me from Adam, but I just promise you, if I tell you it's in the Bible, it's going to be in the Bible. And there's just some General Hospital moments in the Bible that we all just kind of shudder over when we read them. And so and I have no idea what's on General Hospital other than I've seen the words, so there it is. There may be a better option than that, but anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. These are just gross things. Well, we are all glad that in Leviticus later it was passed, you are not to marry your brother's wife. And some of us would just be in more trouble than we can imagine if we had to do that today. It would just create all kinds of different difficulties. But since we've lost 2 sons, the father then isn't coming to the agreement to bring the 3rd son because it's like, well, she's not a lot of good luck. We've lost 2 so far. And so I think the 3rd one is getting old enough, and the father hasn't fulfilled the responsibilities of allowing the 3rd son to go into this woman. Oh, I'm glad we're past that. So here we are, verse 12. The wife of Judah, well, Judah is comforted. He goes down to the shears. He has a good friend, and her name's Tamar. Oh, your father-in-law is going to shear his sheep. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, wrapped herself, and the road to Timnah. She saw that Shelah was grown up. She had not been given to him in marriage. Judah saw her and thought she was a prostitute. She'd covered her face. I'll go into you. He didn't know if it was his daughter-in-law. They made an agreement. No, not a young goat. If you give me a pledge, and what shall I give you? And she says, and this is very shrewd of her, your signet, your cord, and the staff that's in your hand. Kind of like your driver's license and your bank card. Okay, in terms of identification. And he gave them to her. She conceived by her father-in-law. She arose, took off her veil, put on the garments of widowhood. And then they sent the goat to receive them. There's no prostitute here. And verse 23 will let her keep it. About 3 months later, oh, your daughter-in-law has been immoral and she is pregnant by prostitution, immorality. We're going to burn her. And she just says, identify who these are, the signet, the cord, and the staff. She is more righteous than I. I did not give her to my son Sheila, and he did not know her again. So when labor came, there were twins. The midwife, a hand came out. A midwife tied a scarlet thread on it. This one was first, but the other brother was born, and what a breach you've made, and his name is called Perez, a breach. And then afterwards, his brother came out with a scarlet thread in his hand, and they called his name Zerah. So, we'll do this, Lord willing, at the very end tonight. With all the drama that is going on with really all of the sons, and you have the intergenerational jealousy, the conflict, the anger, and you go all the way back to Esau and Jacob. I'm just going to kill him. I'm going to wait till Dad dies, and we're going to kill him. And this isn't. It is sibling rivalry, but it's a lot deeper than just sibling rivalry. This happens between brothers. This happens between fathers and sons. Luke was probably about 16. He says, Dad, let's play one-on-one. I think I can take you. And I said, this is not a good idea. And he said, how come? I said, well, if you're crippled and you can't walk, you are not going to win. I said, I may not be as fast and I may not be as quick as I used to, but I can hold pretty well. And I'm just telling you, you are not going, let's don't even do this. You're not going to win. Ladies, you might understand, but the guys will. I don't care if he is 16, he is not going to win. And there's these different kinds of rivalries that happen generationally with stuff, but this has now been going on for 4 generations. And I want you just to think about this. No one is in mind. Don't anyone leave and thinking, oh, he was looking at me. Each of our families have some qualities that if we look at them, we really don't want them passed down to the next generation. Let me rephrase that. Some families have qualities that it would be best if they're not passed down to the next generation. And we said this very, very early, and this is why it's an intergenerational and interfamily study. We pass on more to our kids and our grandkids than the color of their hair and the color of their eyes. And you've probably all had this experience. You've heard one of your children say something that sounds just exactly like you said it to them, and you're thinking, where did they learn to say that? And you can't fool your kids. They know us better than we know ourselves sometimes. And when you look at these traits that are passed down, here's some sampling. The intergenerational sins, and it includes, and there's more, but just samples, lying, deception, favoritism, sibling rivalry, have grown with each generation. She's my sister has grown and increased in scope and deception with each generation. So here's our sibling rivalry. Isaac is ridiculed by Ishmael, and then Sarah sends Ishmael away. Isaac prefers Esau, but Rebekah favored Jacob. Jacob's going to flee his home to prevent being killed. He's going to be gone for 20 years. Mom's even going to die while he's gone. Laban is going to spend most of the 20 years deceiving and cheating each other between the two of them. Jacob says, you've changed my wages 10 times. Jacob's favoritism of Rachel produced a bitter rivalry between Leah and Rachel to win the I had the most sons competition. And as we noticed, it was 8-4. And Rachel dies in her prayer. Joseph means what? May he add another. And I can't even hardly say this, but in the sense that when she became pregnant with Benjamin, God answered her heartfelt prayer to have another that she had named Joseph after, and it cost her her life. She dies in the struggle. Each of the sons of Jacob are named to hurt the other rivalry. The sons of Jacob grew up in an atmosphere of intense competition and jealousy toward those who Jacob was partial to. And let's kill him was the overwhelming consensus of the older brothers to seeing Joseph without his father's protection. So a bit of chronology, and this will lead us, Lord willing, into the time coming up. because I always wondered, I had to go back and kind of try to track down. Okay, Joseph is 17 when he's sold into slavery. The events that we're going to read about with Potiphar and his wife will happen between the time he is 17 and then after he is thrown into prison because of the deception of Potiphar's wife. So he's going to be in prison until he is 30. Everybody okay so far? So we've got 13 years from the time he is sold into Egypt, and then he's going to work in Potiphar's household, and then he's going to be put into prison. And when he enters Pharaoh's service, okay, he'll be 30 years old. After interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, there were 7 years of plenty. So we're going to add another, everybody with me now? We're going to add another 7 years to that. And then the family is going to come in the second year of the famine. So if we start with 17 when he's there, the time he's in prison, then he has been living 22 years in Egypt before his brothers come to buy bread, to buy grain. Can we say 2 decades? And just kind of cover that. And here's the, and I just can't hardly say this. For 22 years, 10 brothers have, and I've got this written down later, but let's just mention it. 10 brothers have watched Dad just cry and weep and mourn and everything else, and no one peeps. I don't know what your relationship is with your father. You can't imagine watching your father cry for 20 years and you know something and then you don't tell him. And I look at that and just can't even hardly imagine the depth of the deception that's there, because here is their father, this older man, I'm going to go to Sheol, weeping for my son, and not one of them is willing to tell him what happened. Next page. Jacob tore his garments, put sackcloth on his loins, mourned for his sons, and there it is. All of his sons and daughters rose to comfort him. He refused. I'll go to Sheol, mourning, 37. This is 34 through 37. Thus his father wept for him. So the Joseph narratives moves biblical history from the promise of a man to, I said, a dysfunctional family, which is going to become a nation. 70 Israelites are going to go down into Egypt by the time you add Joseph and his wife and their 2 sons. So the narrative begins with Joseph settling in the land of Canaan. Then, and we'll see this, Lord willing, the next few weeks, it moves to Egypt because they're brought there during the famine. Joseph settles the family there. They continue to grow increasingly larger. But they go back to the promised land for funerals, take Jacob back to bury him. And as we said last week, I'm sorry, this is hard to say, but Leah wins the competition. Rachel dies in childbirth on the way, and Leah is going to get to stay with him longer. Leah is going to be buried in the family burial plot. And the 2 major sons through the end of Genesis are going to be Joseph and Judah. And Jacob pronounces the lineage that's going to end up with Christ with Judah. So within the competition that the 2 sisters have had, then Leah is going to receive a lot of the blessings at the very end, especially after her rival sister dies. So the covenant promises made to Abraham, number 4, are passed down through generations. But there's conflict, jealousy, unhealthy competition, and we're going to finally sell our brother into slavery rather than take his life. So each chapter of the first family features either an unhealthy or abusive use of power. Each generation has their share of what not to do in developing healthy intergenerational relationships. But, and this will be a thread we'll follow the rest of the time, God's faithfulness to his covenant promises is the one constant that runs through the soap opera of the intergenerational conflicts. God, and not these characters with feet of clay, is the unifying feature that should be these. He's constantly working out his purposes in spite of their actions. And, as I mentioned, he frequently speaks to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but he's not going to speak directly to Joseph. Yes, he interprets dreams, but he doesn't talk to Joseph like he did the three patriarchs. And even Jacob is going to be the one who informs him of what the covenant promises are going to be. So, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi have disqualified themselves. And it's like, and here's the chosen one. I mean, when you look at Judah, a part of you kind of wonders, well, let's say it this way. God is going to choose Judah in spite of rather than because. And I oftentimes think about that in terms of our blessings in Christ. We are loved in Christ in so many different ways, in spite of rather than because. And this is a part of God's choosing, God's election, God's faithfulness to his covenant promises. So we're under 5, number 1. Unlike his father and grandfather, Judah selects a wife from the Canaanites. So Tamar is not from the descendants of the ancestors like Rebekah and Rachel are going to be, and even Sarah. Judah is the one involved in the slave deal concerning Joseph. Okay, at least he didn't want him to kill him, but he's the one that came, a big part of let's sell our brother into slavery. He physically moves away from the family connections, and so when he starts a family, he moves further away with the Canaanites. After losing 2 sons, he commits adultery with his daughter-in-law. But after that relationship, he appears to have more redeeming moments in his life. And like, for example, later, Genesis 43:8, he tells his father, I will be a pledge for Benjamin. From my hand you will require him. If I don't bring him back, then let me bear the blame forever. And then even when they are pleading with Joseph, and this will take you to the back page. God has found out the guilt of the servants, and then he pleads with Joseph, let me be a pledge for the safety of the boy, and let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant of my Lord. So here's kind of this bittersweet irony. The Canaanite girl who, and how do you even say this, slept with 2 of Judah's sons and then conceives twins by her father-in-law, is in the family genealogy of Jesus. And just kind of let that sink in. This is also hard to say. If you're Mary, are you really going to tell your inquiring neighbors that you got pregnant through the Holy Spirit? I mean, you basically can't say anything because no one's going to believe you. And when you hear statements in the Gospels that, oh yes, we know who his mother and father are, then you hear that incriminating evidence. And so, sorry I have to laugh, when the tax collector writes to the Jews about the coming of the Messiah, then he includes the Canaanite woman who slept with 2 of his sons before she got pregnant through her father-in-law as the first of the females that's in the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1 of the coming of Jesus. Can I say the soap opera continues? In one sense, though, her actions are more in harmony with the divine initiative that's under number 6. So along with Rahab, who's going to be a Canaanite prostitute who hid the spies, and Ruth, a Moabitess, then here are these ladies that are in the line. And notice when you open your New Testament, this is the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ. We're going to put David first, son of David, and then he's the son of Abraham. And it's going to come like this. It's going to come Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then we're going to go to Perez. And I just kind of shudder. Hezron, Ram, Abinadab, Nation, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, and then there comes David. And it's just amazing that, as we're going to close with, more often than not, in spite of, rather than because of, the people's faithfulness to the covenant, God brings his purposes and his will about. So this is number 7. God can use evil purposes to bring about his purposes. Sinful nature can frustrate the divine purposes, but they don't prevent God from fulfilling his plans. And no individual in the narrative is completely innocent. Bless his heart, Joseph contributes to fostering the hate of his brothers by announcing his dreams. I'm kind of of two minds, but I just think, again, Ken is my only brother, but if you're one of the older brothers and the younger brother keeps talking about, we're going to bow down to you, can I just say diplomatically that doesn't come across very well. I'm not necessarily blaming him, but I'm just saying if you look at it from the older brother's point of view, you can see why that doesn't help with the intensity and the hatred that's there. So, number 8, compared to the narrative of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God is increasingly, and I just say absent in terms of speaking. He's not going to have yes, he interprets the dreams, but God doesn't speak to him in dreams like he's going to do with the 3 patriarchs. And notice, Moses will tell this part of Israel's development without a single reference to God speaking to Joseph. But as the narrative unfolds, the reader will agree with Joseph when he tells his brothers later, you meant this for harm, but God meant it for good. So God works his purposes in providence in spite of human frailty and weakness. Sometimes he works through their weaknesses rather than their strength. And like I said, Judah had more shortcomings. His earthly father gave him a praiseworthy place when he gives the blessings. And through the providence of his heavenly father, the staff becomes a scepter that will not depart from Judah. So Judah's feet of clay will demonstrate God's ability to carry out his will and his covenant promises, sometimes through, but more often in spite of, the actions of his chosen people. So it would come to the end of Genesis in a few days. God will be working through the life of Joseph, but he does not speak directly to him. And if you've been in classes, especially on Sunday morning, I don't know where I came across this, but I'm so convinced of this. When we look back in our lives, we learn more about God through the rear view mirror of the events of our lives than we do the windshield. I'm a new student at Oklahoma Christian. I don't have a car. If you know where Walgreens is, by Mardell's, that's the nearest gas station. So if you ask a girl for a date off campus, she needs to be on the cross-country team because there's nothing close by. And I'm trying to be thoughtful, So I get out the phone directory and I call 3 girls on Tuesday night for a Friday night date, just trying to be thoughtful ahead of time. Get ready. The first one tells me that she knows on Tuesday that Friday night she's going to be washing her hair. The second tells me that she knows that she's going to be doing her fingernails. And the third one knows that Friday night she's going to be studying, so she's not available to go out. So guys, what do? You hang up the phone and say, these are the most organized girls I've ever met in my life. And you stop and think, but when you look at the events and as things worked out, God's oftentimes working through things, not necessarily always because of us, but because sometimes in spite of us.
That's right.
And I just want to encourage you to look through your life, and sometimes things that have been the most disappointing thing to you at the time, you let God's providence and God's care go on for a little bit, and you'll look back and what's that country and western song? I thank God for unanswered prayers, and some of those things we really just hoped would work out. We look back down the road and we think, God saved me again. And I might have been disappointed at the time, but just keep that in mind as we continue with Joseph. We oftentimes will learn more about God through the rearview mirror of the events and the providence in our life than we do immediately through the windshield. God bless.
Thank you, Dale.
The song that kept going through my brain tonight was Hank Williams Jr. It's a country, or it's a family tradition. Hey, why you don't smoke? You kept